My name is Tiffany, and I was my mother's first child when she was still trying to arrange her life, clinging to dreams of great happiness that always seemed to elude her, leaving only vague promises of a better future in its place. She married my father Thomas when she was very young, almost a girl, and he was just as young, with his plans for life still not solidified, but with a heart full of hope and love. Their union was built on sincerity of feelings, not calculations, but it seems that this was not enough for my mother, because a few years later, when I had not yet learned to speak properly, and all my worlds were in my father's hands, in his laughter and warm hugs, she met someone else, a man with a purse, thick as a brick, and a shiny car that sparkled in the sun like the embodiment of the very life she'd probably always wanted. Richard was generous with gifts and smiles, but there was always something slippery about him, something subtly cold, even when he handed me another box of chocolates or allowed me to spin around in his spacious office full of glass shelves and expensive trinkets, which reflected a distorted, unusual reality for me. But next to him, Mom was different. Her laughter, which had previously sounded light and free, became somehow strained, and her gaze became wary, as if she expected a blow at any moment. And when that gaze fell on me, something else flared up in it. Annoyance, almost disappointment, as if my presence reminded her of something she so desperately wanted to forget. I still didn't understand then why her voice became harsh when she talked about me. Why that evening, when I was sitting in front of the TV and pretended not to hear their conversation, she said, "She looks too much like Tom. He always asks questions, always looks the way he does." Back then, it seemed to me that being like Dad was a good thing, because Dad was kind, funny, and he loved me, even if his apartment was small and his money was always running out too fast. I was happy with him, just kicking a ball in the park, choking with laughter, or sitting at a small kitchen table, eating cheap pizza, while he told me stories about how he dreamed of becoming a pilot as a child, but became someone else, but maybe it was for the best. But Mom said otherwise. My mother's words burned me, stayed somewhere inside and slowly grew there like weeds, turning a child's self-confidence into insecurity. She often said, "Can't you do anything right?" when I was trying to help around the house, folding clothes incorrectly, or failing to solve a math problem. And Dad always said, "You're doing great, Tiffany," and I wanted to believe him. But life with Mom and Richard was getting stressful, especially when I started school and my mom suddenly became obsessed with how I looked, who I was friends with, what I was wearing. "Why can't you be like Clara's daughter?" she grumbled, holding up a picture of my classmate, beaming in a new dress at a party I wasn't even invited to. I tried to match it, but the more I tried, the worse it got. And then there was that evening, an evening that I remember especially clearly. I accidentally left my shoes in the hallway, and that was enough to make Mom blush. She scolded me for a long time while I stood in front of her, pursing my lips, and at some point I couldn't stand it. "At least Dad doesn't scream because of the dirt." I didn't even have time to realize what I'd said before I felt a sharp slap on my cheek. Her palm burned me, and her breath, smelling of coffee and anger, was so close that I wanted to close my eyes. "Don't you dare say that," she hissed. Tears stung my eyes, but I held back. Dad always said that crying means giving someone else power over you. That night, lying in bed, I swore to myself that she would never see my tears again. And then Mom announced that she was pregnant. The house has changed, the atmosphere has become different, filled with a strange expectation, tension. She was glowing, but not for me. She looked at her stomach with a tenderness she had never looked at me with and said, "Everything will be perfect." Richard was elated. "We need to redo the guest room for our princess," he said one day, and I suddenly felt cold. My heart squeezed for a moment, as if something broke in my chest, because I realized that they were talking about my room, about my little corner in this house, which, despite everything, I still considered my own, the only place where I could be myself, where there were still traces of my childhood. Old plush toys, scribbled diaries, a stack of books on the bedside table. But now this place should belong to someone else, someone I hadn't even seen yet. "What about my room?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, not betraying the tremor that rose inside, clinging to my ribs because I already knew the answer. It was written on my mother's face, in her smile, which suddenly tightened, as if she did not expect me to decide to ask this question. "You can move into a smaller room, Tiffany," she said, as if it were non-negotiable, as if the decision had already been made a long time ago, and I was just late with my doubts. "That's fair enough. The child will need space." Fair, how strange it sounded coming from her. She said it as if she had convinced herself that she was making the right choice, but a dull indignation rose up inside me, which I could not utter. I could have said that I was a child too, that I needed a place too, that this room was mine, but the words stuck in my throat because I already knew that in this house my word would never have the same power as hers. So I packed up my things and moved into the smallest room, barely bigger than a closet, a room that barely held a bed, a table, and my old bookcase, but even that seemed too luxurious. I was silent. I didn't complain. I was just trying to get used to this new order. The months passed quickly, alternating like the pages in a book that you read mechanically, not listening to the meaning, just letting the words slide through your mind. And soon Lily was born. Everyone was talking about her. "Isn't she the most beautiful child you've ever seen?" Her mother enthusiastically repeated this phrase to her friends, holding Lily in her arms as if she were made of the most precious porcelain. "Yes, she's cute," I muttered once, trying to feel like I was part of the conversation, but Mom didn't even pay attention to my words. Lily was really charming. I couldn't help but love her. How can you not love this tiny creature with plump pink cheeks and light fluffy hair? I wanted to be a good older sister. I wanted to participate, help, be close. But my mother didn't seem to give me such an opportunity. One day, when Mom was busy in the kitchen, I carefully made my way into Lily's room, tiptoed over to her crib, looked inside, watching her happily humming, clutching a blanket in her fists. "Hi, Lily," I whispered, holding out my finger for her to grab it in her tiny hands. But at that moment, a harsh voice came from behind me, which made me shudder. "What are you doing, Tiffany?" Mom was standing in the doorway. Her gaze was as sharp as a knife. I jerked my hand away, as if I'd been burned. "I just wanted to see her," I protested, feeling something heavy rise inside, as tears sting my eyes, but I won't let them escape. "I told you to ask before you go into her room." It wasn't fair. It hurt so much that something broke inside. Later, during the weekend at Dad's, I couldn't stand it and told him everything while we were sitting in our favorite pizzeria. "Mom is acting like I might break Lily. Like I'm not part of this family," I blurted out, and I immediately regretted saying it out loud. Dad chewed thoughtfully, and then, looking into my eyes, he said, "You know, Tiffany, it's just hard for some people to share love. They're afraid that if they give it to someone else, there won't be any left for them. But you have a big heart. Don't let your mom's habits make you think otherwise." His words helped a little. But when I returned home, the distance between me and my mom became even greater. Even when I tried to tell her something about school, about friends, about what I care about, she always listened with half an ear, half immersed in caring for Lily. And then there was that day. I came home trembling with joy, clutching the certificate, the second place at the scientific exhibition. I was sure that at least now she would look at me differently, that it would be important to her. "Look, Mom, I won. This is a reward for my project," I blurted out, handing her the paper. She held Lily in her arms, fed her, without even looking at me. "That's sweet, honey. Put it on the fridge," or something like that, she said absently. I stood clutching this piece of paper, this symbol of my diligence, my work, my desire to be noticed, and suddenly realized that for her it was just another piece of paper. I hung it on the fridge. It hung unevenly, slightly askew. And I realized that it wasn't just about paper. It was about me. It was around this time that things got shaky. When I entered high school, I already felt like a stranger in this house, a guest who stayed too long. Mom's attention belonged entirely to Lily. Richard was indifferent. He barely noticed me until I did something that annoyed him. And then something happened that changed everything forever. Mom decided it was time for me to move in with Dad forever. The day she told me about it, we had dinner together, a rare occasion when only she and I were at the table. Richard was late at work, and Lily had already eaten and fallen asleep in her room, so there was an unusual silence in the house, broken only by the clink of cutlery. I remember looking at her intently, waiting for her to say something important, because her back was too straight and her movements were too precise, as if she had rehearsed this conversation in advance. "Tiffany, we need to talk about your future," she said, without looking up, carefully moving her fork around her plate, as if the food on it could give her an answer she couldn't find inside herself. There was no warmth in her voice, just the cold, businesslike tone she usually used with bank employees or Lily's babysitter when she made a mistake. That tone immediately made me tense, as if the room had suddenly become colder. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to sound indifferent, but my heart was already pounding in my throat. "We discussed it, and we came to the conclusion that it would be better for you to move in with your father." I almost choked on the water. "What? Why?" I looked at her, hoping that she was about to laugh and say that this was a joke, but her face remained tense. And then I realized that everything was serious, that the decision had already been made, that I had no choice. With the birth of a child, it became difficult here, Mom sighed, and this sound was filled with irritation, as if it was difficult for her to even explain it to me. "Listen, Tiffany, you're not a child anymore. You need your own space, and we can't provide that. It's getting crowded here, but to be honest." She paused, and I suddenly wanted her to stop talking, to just not say what she was going to say, because I knew it would hurt. "The financial burden turned out to be more than we expected. It will be better for everyone." I pushed my plate away. My appetite disappeared instantly. "What about the school? Friends?" "You can go to a new school, make new friends," she said with a shrug, as if I could just erase my whole life and start over, as if I didn't have a past that I didn't want to leave. In the following weeks, everything happened in a blur. I packed my things, putting them in boxes, and with each new bundle, my world became smaller and smaller, shrinking until it could fit into several cardboard boxes that were supposed to go with me to the other side of the city. Richard barely said goodbye. Lily, too young to understand, just hugged me in embarrassment, and Mom just watched me leave, without tears, without regret, without a single attempt to hold me back. The day of the move was difficult. Dad was waiting for me at the door of his apartment with open arms and a worried smile. His eyes were warm, full of love, but there was sadness in them. He understood why I was here, understood that this was not my choice, that I felt thrown away, unnecessary. The apartment was clean, but cluttered with old things, memories of a life frozen in the past. My new room was half the size of the one I had before, with walls that needed painting for a long time and a window overlooking the brick wall of the neighboring house. But it was quiet here, and Dad tried. But no amount of silence could numb the pain. The first day at the new school was brutal. I felt eyes on me, heard whispers as I walked through the crowded corridors, clutching the straps of my backpack so that my fingers turned white. "This is the new girl," they said behind her. It was like I was something strange, an alien element in their familiar world. In class, I tried to stay away, kept silent, and drew in my notebook, just to avoid looking at these people who were looking at me. When the bell rang, I was the first to run out the door, just to avoid unnecessary stares, unnecessary questions. At home, Dad noticed that something was wrong. "How are things at school? What is it?" he asked, trying to make his voice light and casual, but there was concern in his eyes. "It's okay," I lied, dropping my backpack at the door. Dad looked at me for a while, then nodded. "Tiffany, if it gets hard for you, just tell me, okay? We are together. You're not alone." His words meant a lot to me. But the loneliness I felt was too deep, corroding from the inside. And it wasn't just that I missed old friends, familiar streets, and the usual order of things. The thing was, I felt like I'd been thrown out, because I was too much of a burden. Adjusting to life with Dad wasn't easy, but I realized pretty quickly that if I didn't pull myself together, things would only get worse, and no one but myself would do it for me. I woke up one morning, when the dim remnants of the night still hung outside the window, and looked around the cramped room, the modest furniture, the books scattered on the table, the old carpet, which still had stains from spilled tea on it, and suddenly felt a strange, but such a sharp determination that seemed to flare up inside, filling me with awareness questioner. I will not stay in this state. I will not let circumstances determine my life. I will find a way to escape. "No one else will do this for me," I muttered to myself, getting out of bed and resolutely pulling on a warm sweater. Dad noticed the changes in me almost immediately. One day at breakfast, when I was poring over the pages of my textbook, chewing on toast, he looked up from his cup of coffee and looked at me intently. "You've been looking more determined lately, Tiffany. What's on your mind?" I swirled the spoon in my cup of tea, wondering how best to express what was inside of me. "I want to achieve something, Dad. I don't want to be stuck in this city forever." He nodded, crossing his arms over his chest, his gaze serious but approving. "I hear you, baby. So what's the plan?" I took a deep breath, feeling my heart beat faster just from voicing my thoughts out loud. "A scholarship, big for the best students. I'm going to get it." I said it more to convince myself than him, but his smile was exactly the encouragement I needed. "If anyone can do it, it's you. Just tell me what you need from me." School was difficult, especially now that I knew I had to give my best. Long hours of study, endless notes in notebooks, evening classes when I sat at my textbooks until late at night. The teachers noticed the changes. Even the strictest ones seemed to respect my new sense of purpose. One day, Mr. Jensen, my math teacher, detained me after class. "Tiffany, your work has improved dramatically. What's the interest?" I didn't bother picking up textbooks. "I need this scholarship. I have plans, and they don't include being stuck here forever." He studied me for a moment, and then nodded slowly. "Well, keep it up and let me know if you need any more help. I'm here." It wasn't easy to make friends, but over time, I managed to find a few people who didn't find it strange that I spent more time reading books than talking. During lunch, I sat with Maria and Luke, two guys who weren't at the top of the social ladder, but who could laugh in a way that was always easy with them. "Tiffany, you're like a library ninja now, aren't you?" Luke joked once, nudging me as we sat down at the table with the trays. I smiled, taking a bite of the apple. I need to be secretive if I want to get the best places to study. Maria, quiet but sincere, looked at me with a slight smile. "It's cool what you're doing." I just nodded. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The pressure increased as the application deadline approached, but Dad was there, my rock. He always cooked me a hot dinner, always listened to me when the stress got too much, always reminded me that I was not alone when it seemed to me that the world was shrinking around me. And now the day I've been waiting for has come. I was standing at the kitchen table, holding an envelope in my hands, inside of which was the answer to all my efforts. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. Dad was standing next to me. His breathing was almost inaudible, He was looking at me, waiting, afraid to say a word. I read the first lines. My heart started pounding, and suddenly I screamed so loudly that I swear even the neighbors heard us. "Dad, I got it." I jumped, the letter fluttering in my hand like a victory flag. Dad hugged me tightly, laughing with me, his voice trembling with pride. "I knew it. I knew you could do it." When I packed my bags for college a few months later, I no longer felt afraid. I was leaving, but I took with me all these lessons, all this love and hard-earned wisdom, as if they were an integral part of me, a reminder that I had come a long way from being a bullied girl who once felt unnecessary to a woman who stood firmly on her own 2 feet. After graduating with honors and building a solid career, I finally felt like I had found the stability I had been looking for so long. I was 28, I was doing well professionally, I held a good position, I lived in a cozy apartment, which I furnished to my taste, and only recently I started dating a wonderful guy named Jack. He was sensitive, understanding, a real support. Next to him, I felt that I did not need to pretend or prove his value, because he saw me for real and accepted me for who I am. And then, as if out of nowhere, the bell rang. I looked at the phone screen and my breath caught in my throat. We hadn't talked much since I left, and to be honest, it was more her choice than mine. She rarely called for no reason, and if she did, it was usually with some kind of request, covered by a thin veil of care, which always hid something she needed. It was necessary from me. "Tiffany, your sister Lily is going to college in your city," Mom said without preamble, and I immediately felt the tension in her voice. "We paid for her tuition, and Richard and I decided it would be best if she stayed with you." Her tone left no room for objections. It wasn't a request. It was a decision she had already made, and all I had to do was accept it. I hesitated. Memories of my complicated, strained relationship with my mother flashed through my mind, touching old, long-healed wounds. Lily was still a child when I left. I didn't know much about what she had become, but I wanted to believe that everything could be different, that she and I could have a chance at a normal, sisterly relationship that we had never had. "It's okay, Mom. I'll help Lily. It would be nice to reconnect," I replied, trying not to sound skeptical. A week later, Lily moved in, and almost immediately it became clear that we lived in completely different worlds. She was stunning, bright, loud, confident, with a dazzling smile and a look that was always assessing, always looking for something she could want. She had brought with her not just suitcases, but a whole baggage of expectations, and her personality demanded that they be fulfilled. "Can you make sure we have almond milk and cabbage?" she casually threw on her first evening, glancing briefly in the mirror and straightening her perfectly coiffed hair. "I'm on a special diet." I blinked, lost for a second in the sudden demand, but then I nodded. "Of course, I'll add them to the shopping list." I tried to adjust to it, but the more time passed, the more difficult it became. Lily lived as if tomorrow didn't exist. She hung out all night, returning in the early morning, shaking the walls of the apartment with loud laughter, while I lay awake, worried about upcoming meetings and presentations, scrolling through to-do lists in my head, realizing that I would have to fight fatigue, while she sleeps until noon. Jack came to visit me one afternoon, just as Lily was getting ready for another party. I noticed how she looked at him, too attentively, too appreciatively, and then smiled too sweetly for too long. When she was gone, Jack exhaled softly and sat down across from me. "Tiffany, I think Lily has the wrong idea about me," he said carefully. She was quite flirtatious. I felt a wave of anger rise up inside, mixed with embarrassment. "Thanks for telling me, Jack. I'll talk to her." When I ran into Lily in the evening, her reaction was predictable, either denial or laughter, and of course, she chose the latter. "Oh, come on, Tiffany, I'm just being friendly," she laughed, rolling her eyes. "Lily, this is my fiancé, you have to respect that." I tried to speak calmly, but there was steel in my voice. Lily shrugged, looking at me with a slight sneer. What can I do if he likes me too? Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I looked at her, trying to figure out if she had really just said that, if she was really so selfish that she didn't see boundaries, didn't understand what she was doing. And at that moment, I realized that I couldn't live like this anymore. I don't have to protect my life, my love, my home from my own sister. You need to find another place to live, Lily. It won't work. She froze, her lips twitched, and for a moment there was something like surprise in her eyes, but it was immediately replaced by anger. Are you serious? Yes. Lily exhaled, abruptly turned around and ran out of the apartment, slamming the door so that my favorite cup fell off the shelf. An hour later, the phone rang. I looked at the screen and my stomach clenched. Mom. I knew that this call would not bring anything good, that it would not be filled with care, that it would not be followed by words of support or attempts to understand my point of view. And yet, a part of me, despite all the disappointments, still hoped. I pressed the answer button and barely had time to bring the phone to my ear when a cold, strained voice came on the line. You're such an envious girl, Tiffany. Can't stand to see your sister happy, can you? I froze for a moment, pressing the phone closer to my ear, feeling an old, familiar feeling rising inside. A mixture of pain and fatigue, the same fatigue that had accumulated over the years. I just want respect, Mom. That's all, I replied, trying to speak calmly. But as always, my words had no meaning for her. They just crumbled against the blank wall that she had built between us many years ago. She wasn't listening. She has already made her conclusions. After that conversation, everything went quiet. Lily didn't try to contact me anymore, and I didn't seek an appointment either. I occasionally heard about her from mutual acquaintances. Rumor has it that she dropped out of college, giving herself up to life in her new social circle, where everything was built on charm, whims, and money. As for me, I returned to my life, to Jack, to work, to building my own boundaries. And at some point, I realized that it no longer hurt me that they weren't around, because I had my own happiness, my own support, my future, which did not depend on from their approval. 2 years have passed. I have achieved a lot during this time. I was moving up the career ladder, getting new opportunities, and enjoying my relationship with Jack, which was getting stronger. Life flowed smoothly and steadily, and I didn't feel the need to look back. And that's when I heard the news. Lily was getting married. They said that she had met a rich man, that her wedding would be a real event, that not a single detail would go unnoticed. Because the family spared no money, hearing the best organizers, artists, and actors to make this day unforgettable. Feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and goodwill, I decided to call home and congratulate them. Mom took the phone. Mom, I heard about Lily's wedding, I began, trying to speak lightly, not showing how much effort it cost me to just make that call. I just wanted to say congratulations. There was a short pause on the other end, and then her voice sounded cold, distant, alien. Don't worry, Tiffany. We're not expecting you at the wedding. It's only for rich people, and we don't need beggars there. Her words were like a blow. I felt my fingers tighten on the phone, as a familiar wave of rejection spread through my body, as that voice from childhood sounded in my chest again. Can't you do anything right? I swallowed hard. Really, Mom? Is that how you're going to be? What did you expect, Tiffany? You've always been difficult. Just stay away. And then she hung up. I stood there with my phone in my hand, the beep echoing in my ears, and a growing feeling of pain in my chest mixed with something new, something I couldn't immediately recognize. It was a release. I don't have to try anymore. I later found out that Lily's wedding was really luxurious. Sparkling chandeliers, designer dresses, lots of champagne, crowds of famous people, a concert of guest stars. They spared no expense to make this day perfect. But it didn't bother me anymore. Time passed, and life did not stand still. One day Jack proposed to me. I looked at him, at his kind, warm eyes, at his sincere smile, and felt my heart fill with joy. Because it was real, it was love, not held together by calculation or profit, but built on trust, respect, and the fact that we were each other's home. We started planning the wedding. Nothing extravagant, no ostentatious celebrations, just what mattered to us, just what we wanted. In every element, in every decision, there was something deeply personal, filled with love and sincerity. I called my dad to tell him the news. "Tiffany, this is wonderful." His voice was full of joy, and I could hear him smiling. "You can bet I'll be there." I wouldn't miss it for the world. His words filled me with warmth. Encouraged, I decided to make one last attempt to establish a relationship with my mother. I dialed her number, and my heart was pounding as I waited for her to answer. I paused briefly before continuing. "I'm getting married. I want you to come." There was a short, almost bored sigh on the other end of the line. "No, Tiffany. Not interested in attending a low-key loser gathering. Don't count on me." I felt something tremble inside, but it was no longer a disappointment. That was the final understanding. I swallowed hard, suppressing the bitterness that was still trying to pierce me, but couldn't. "Okay, Mom, take care of yourself." I said it calmly and hung up the phone, knowing that this was probably the last time I would invite her into my life. Our wedding day was simple but beautiful. Dad, holding my arm, led me down the aisle, and his presence was a constant comfort to me, an anchor holding me in a moment filled with sincere joy, not ostentatious luxury. There were real, warm congratulations in the room, filled with love, laughter, and sincere wishes for happiness, and there was so much warmth in it that I caught myself thinking. I never knew that a wedding could be like this, without tension, without having to prove something to someone, without other people's assessments and cold smiles hiding calculation. It was a stark contrast to the grandeur and soullessness of the spectacle that Lily had staged when she got married. Our modest reception was like a celebration of a family, not one that was determined by blood ties, but one that we ourselves chose, consisting of people who really loved us for who we are, and not for money, status, or the opportunity to show off among the elite. We danced late into the night, recalled funny stories from the past, hugged friends, laughed until we cried, and at some point I caught myself thinking that life was finally moving forward exactly the way I always wanted. Jack and I were happy, making plans, enjoying every day, and when I found out we were expecting a baby, the world suddenly took on new, even warmer colors. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly protected, loved, full of strength and hope. And then, when it seemed that life was going on in its own measured, happy course, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen automatically, and my stomach clenched. Mom. She didn't call with congratulations. "Tiffany, you have to accept us. We are desperate." She blurted out, not even bothering to say hello. I froze in place, pressing the phone to my ear, feeling an unpleasant chill run through my body. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, even though part of me didn't want to know the answer. "Richard's business has collapsed." Her voice was strained, full of panic, like I'd never heard it before. "We mortgaged the house to pay for Lily's wedding, and now everything is just gone. The bank is taking away housing, and Lily's marriage has collapsed too. Her husband kicked her out. He demands money for her cheating." I took a deep breath, trying to process this flood of information. "Okay, slow down. What exactly are you asking me to do?" "We need a place to stay. We're all coming to you." She said it as if it was the most obvious and natural thing to do, as if I should have just said, "of course," and prepared the rooms for them. It's like nothing happened in the past, as if I hadn't been kicked out of the house, as if I hadn't been told that I was superfluous. No, Mom, you can't just decide to move in with me. That's not how it works. I expected her to start coaxing, but instead her voice instantly became cold, hard, and overbearing. You owe us, Tiffany, after all we've done for you. I clutched the phone in my hand, feeling anger rising in me, mixed with amazement. Oh, Mom, do you remember what you were like when I needed you the most? My voice was steady, but everything was boiling inside. You pushed me out. You chose everyone and everything instead of me, and now you expect me to just open my doors to you. Her tone instantly became even sharper, almost shrill. You're being selfish, Tiffany. I closed my eyes, trying not to laugh, although it wasn't laughter from merriment, but rather from the absurdity of what was happening. You're my mother, and you've never let me forget that. But being a mother is not what you think it is. It's not about debts and demands. She seemed to realize that she was trying to persuade me not to take her, and then the threat came into play. You're going to regret this, Tiffany. I can even sue you. Get what I deserve. I did laugh, but it was the laugh of a man who is no longer afraid. Go ahead and try. Dad was my guardian when you kicked me out, remember? I paused briefly, savoring every word. Are you going to claim that your daughter didn't let you live off her after you left her? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her brain frantically trying to find some kind of loophole, some way to put pressure on me. But she no longer had any power over me. It's not over yet, Tiffany, she hissed at last, and I heard the short beeps that meant she hung up. I slowly lowered the phone and closed my eyes. And suddenly I felt that, despite all the anger, despite this absurd conversation, despite the threats, I felt better. Jack and I were busy preparing the nursery, choosing paint for the walls, arguing over which shade of blue would be more soothing and which would be too gloomy, putting tiny jumpsuits in a new chest of drawers, and trying to assemble the crib, following instructions that seemed designed to completely confuse even the most patient parents. All this time, I was coping with the usual ups and downs of pregnancy, getting used to the new sensations, to the fact that now life is growing in my body, our child, who will soon change everything. It was a Sunday morning, bright, fresh, filled with sunlight that gently penetrated through the translucent curtains, making the room seem even more cozy. I was laying out baby clothes, carefully folding tiny socks and bodysuits, feeling a warm, almost unreal feeling inside that very soon these little things would be worn by our baby. Jack was drilling something in the corner of the room, his electric screwdriver making a steady, lulling hum as he concentrated on assembling the furniture, stopping periodically to check if he was doing everything right. At some point, he stopped working, wiped his forehead with the palm of his hand, and looked at me with a smile. How's it going, Tiffany? Need some help? I put aside another jumpsuit and ran my hand over it, feeling the softness of the fabric, imagining how one day it would end up on our child. I'll do it, it's simple. I'm thinking about everything. Is this really happening? Jack came closer, sat down next to me, and covered my hand with his warm hand. It really is, he said, his voice full of awe, joy, and just a little, barely nervous excitement. We're going to be parents, Tiffany. I smiled, but I didn't have time to answer, because at that moment there was a knock on the door. I was surprised. Who could come so early on Sunday? Jack got up, headed for the door, and I continued to carefully arrange the children's things, listening to his voice and the muffled sounds of conversation. After a moment, he called out to me. Tiffany, this is for you. When I entered the living room, my heart skipped a beat, and then jumped with surprise and joy. Dad was standing in front of me, with a big smile on his face and a teddy bear in his hands. Dad, what are you doing here? I couldn't hide my delight. I immediately rushed to him and hugged him tightly. I wanted to see how my beloved daughter was doing, he said, stroking my back. And I brought something for my future grandson. He handed me a teddy bear, soft, fluffy, with kind, sparkling eyes, and I squeezed it in my hands, feeling warmth rise inside, as all the tension of the last months dissolved in this simple but so important gesture. Thanks, Dad. It means the whole world to me, both that you're here and that you care. We sat down, and Dad looked around the room. Half-assembled furniture, stacks of children's books, boxes of toys. It looks like you're almost ready for the baby, he remarked with a smile. We're trying. It's a lot of work, but we're excited, I admitted, but then fell silent, biting my lip, feeling like I needed to say something else. I sighed and, looking at my father, said softly, Dad, I had a conversation with my mom recently. It's all gone. Not so good. His father's face became serious, and concern flashed in his eyes. I've heard about it, he sighed, shaking his head. Your mom was there. Not too happy, are you? No, she wasn't. I shook my head, remembering the coldness in her voice, the harsh words that I no longer allowed to hurt me. But Dad, I stood my ground. I had to, for my own sake, for Jack's sake, for the sake of the child. We need peace in this house. He looked at me carefully, then nodded slowly. You did the right thing, Tiffany. You've built your life, your family. Sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to stop others from destroying what you've created. The day passed quickly, filled with conversations, laughter. Dad told us stories, shared funny parenting tips, sometimes joked, sometimes spoke seriously. But all the time I felt one thing: he was there, he loved me, he was always my quiet support. And when the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, we were sitting on the porch, enjoying the warm evening air. A light breeze rustled in the treetops, creating a sense of calm, as if nature itself said that everything was going as it should. Jack hugged me, and I leaned into him, feeling his warmth, his confidence, his love. You know, despite everything with Mom, despite all this drama, I feel happy. We have each other. We're on the verge of a new chapter, and I have a feeling it's going to be amazing. I watched as the daylight faded, as the soft rays of the sun disappeared over the horizon, leaving the world in a warm twilight. Jack kissed the top of my head. That's how it's going to be, Tiffany. We have everything we need. When night fell and Dad said goodbye, leaving for home, I stood at the door looking after him and felt something new inside, complete satisfaction, calmness, confidence in the future. Life wasn't easy. But all the trials, all the difficulties, all the mistakes and pain brought me here, to this moment, where I was surrounded by love, where I was supported, where I was needed. And I knew that only good things were ahead of us.